Memorial Day. Hi, this is Penny Hallgren from QuiltBlockLibrary.com and QuiltBlockLibrary.tv. And this is Memorial Day weekend in the United States, so I thought I would show you how to sew together the Washington Star quilt block. This quilt block actually has 2 stars in it, and I'm doing it in red, white, and blue to celebrate the holiday. So I've got all my pieces cut out and I'm ready to get started. Thanks for joining me. Let's go to the sewing machine. Often when I'm sewing blocks, I look for pieces that I can combine so that I don't have as many seams in the block. And so what I did was to take a look at the rotary cutting instructions, and I could see that in the center of these stars there are 4 little square patches. And so instead of cutting 4 individual 2.5-inch squares, I cut one large 4.5-inch square. And then my markings here show that I've got 4 of those. And then also I saw that I could combine 2 patches and cut a triangle that's 2.5 inches by 4.5 inches. And so I put little circles there. And so that's why on the flannel board you'll see different shapes. My first step though is to sew all of these little half square triangles together. And instead of laying them out, I've just stacked them up. So I've got red and white and blue and white half square triangles together. So I'll just put them right sides together and stitch on the long end. Now that I have my patches all laid out and the half square triangles are all sewn together, it's time to decide how I'm going to sew the patches together to complete the block. So the first thing I'm going to do is take all of these little units and sew them together. And the way I'll sew them together is just to sew these right sides together first and then attach, so I'll sew this way and then attach them this way, so I'll end up with a square. Now that these are sewn together, I'll just flip these over and sew these patches together so that I'll end up with the squares. Now that I've got the squares sewn together, I can start sewing the rows together. So what I can do is sew these in columns and start by just sewing the first column to the second column. So I'll place those right sides together and chain stitch. I have these first 2 columns sewn together. They're still hooked together with their chain stitching. And now that I look at the center strip, in order to get this one sewn together and sewn together here, I'm going to need to sew these 2 at the top and the bottom. So that'll be my first step. Now that these little guys are sewn together at the top and bottom, I can take my next 2 columns and sew them together. Now I have these 2 sets of columns sewn together, and so what I'm going to do is turn this on top of here and then sew these together. So this is going to be a little bit tricky. And then I'm just going to stick a pin into each one of these so that I remember which pair I'm sewing together. Now I have these all sewn together, so I've got 4 patches across, and the next thing I'm going to do is sew this last patch onto each one of these rows so that I'll have all my rows sewn together. Now I have all the patches in every row sewn together. They're chain sewn, so they're all attached, and everything is in its place from what I can tell. And so I'm ready to start sewing the rows together. So I'll just fold it down, and I can just pick this whole thing up and take it to my sewing machine and stitch across the row. The top row is sewn, and now I'm just going to sew the second row to the 3rd row. And I'm just going to continue sewing down the rows. So the next time you see me, this quilt block will be finished. This Washington Star quilt block is all finished and ready to be put into a quilt. This is a pretty cool little block. It's got 2 stars and it's separated by the little triangles here on the top and bottom. It's relatively easy to sew, even though it has a lot of patches in it. And by combining the patches, you can make it even quicker. But you do have to be careful how you measure and how you cut to be sure that you're cutting your patches the correct size, because the pattern is going to have it in all little 2.5-inch squares. So if you make a 4-inch square, be sure it's a 4.5-inch square, adding your seam allowances. Thanks for joining me. This is Penny Hallgren from QuiltBlockLibrary.com and QuiltBlockLibrary.tv. If you're not already there, head on over to QuiltBlockLibrary.com and get the free download of this Washington Star quilt block pattern. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Peaceful piecing.